My name is Samuel Harris. I'm 27 years old and I'm a full-time worker. I'm employed at a factory for a major outdoor product manufacturing company. I landed this job when I was around 19. At first, it was just a part-time gig. One day, the plant manager approached me and asked, "How about becoming a full-time employee?" My educational background and job history are somewhat different. I finished middle school and that's about it. Well, I did attend high school for a couple of years, but never ended up graduating. It's not like studying was boring or anything like that. For me, school itself was too dull. Luckily, my parents are quite unconventional. They just laughed about it when I skipped high school to get lost in the mountains and became obsessed with caving. Eventually, I'd saved up some cash from my part-time job and started staying near the mountains to challenge myself against the rocks. I love mountain climbing, of course, but what was really intriguing for me was rock climbing. Even now, when I save up enough money from work, I take a long vacation and go climbing abroad. You could say I work to fund that. Your work is meticulous. It really helps us out. The plant manager takes a good care of me, always checking in on me. I truly appreciate how warmly he welcomed me, a mid-career recruit with only a middle school education. Boss, if you keep praising him like that, he might get a swelled head. There was a teasing voice that I haven't heard in a while. Even in the same work clothes we wear in the factory, her charm is undeniable. Valerie Peterson is in charge of maintenance at the head office. She probably came from the headquarters to check a system that's been having issues since last night. Her long black hair is perfectly straight, and her skin is as smooth as porcelain. She has two cute beauty marks on her left eye. From the first time I met her, I was smitten with her. "What if you were here? You should have shown your face sooner," I retort, a little too happily. "I didn't come here to see you, Samuel." She sticks out her tongue as she playfully teases me. But I have learned by now. She just appears innocent. I mean, I'm probably the only one who likes coming over to such a remote place so quickly. "Plant manager, you gotta handle the systems more carefully," she chides. Her sharp tongue is famous both within the company and at the factory. She's undeniably beautiful, but has a sharp tongue and has an oddball personality. The guys at the factory seem to be hesitant about interacting with her. "You staying over tonight? Got a spot right next to me if you want," I say, another one of our usual playful exchanges. It's a well-known fact in the factory that I'm head over heels for her. Every time I see her face, I can't help but try to woo her. But she's always so deft at deflecting my advances. There were times when my spirit nearly broke, but well, I've decided to take my time to win her over. "Plant manager, looks like Samuel wants to share the covers with you," sidestepped my words as usual. Valerie chuckled away. After that, Valerie told the plant manager that she had some important matters to discuss and disappeared into the office. From the window, the plant manager looked ecstatic. Something good must have happened. I get transferred to the headquarters. After work, the plant manager called me in and told me I was being promoted to the headquarters. This meant a step up in my career. Seems like Valerie was the one who brought in the official orders. "You're young and know what you're doing. You'll be competent at the headquarters too. Why don't you aim higher?" the plant manager passionately said to me. I was a bit thrown off by this sudden event. It's an order from the company and probably non-negotiable, but I'm really fond of this place. First of all, the headquarters are in the middle of the city. There's no trace of the mountains and rocky landscapes that are the bedrock of my lifestyle. I seriously wondered if this might be the time to leave the company. According to the plant manager, it seems he was the one who recommended me for this position. I believe it was out of sheer goodwill. The orders have been issued. There is no room for you to say no at this point. There's some employee housing options available at the headquarters. You can choose a place to live from the list," Valerie said, handing over the information about the housing. I took, standing with an empty mind. "I get what you might be probably thinking, Samuel, but running away without giving it a shot, that's what we'd call being a chicken," she said. Her words steeled my resolve. Running away was different from making a choice for myself. "Running away, watch me, I'll give my all in," I retorted. If one were to say it was a tit-for-tat response, they'd be right. And just like so, I was transferred from the familiar factory nestled in the mountains to the bustling headquarters in the big city. Once my transfer to the headquarters was finalized, I was swamped with handing over my duties and preparing for the move, but I finally managed to settle in. Looking up at the headquarters building, my mouth fell open at its sheer size. The amount of people going in and out was dizzying. On top of that, the building was apparently smoke-free. Lately, I've been feeling the squeeze as a smoker. The first thing I did at the headquarters building was to look for a place to smoke. I showed my ID card to the reception, confirmed my department, and asked about the location of a smoking area. There was still some time before work started. I decided to head for the smoking area to have a cigarette. Of course, he's here right away. The slender, long cigarette suits her delicate fingers. I'm not sure if she ambushed me or if it's a part of her daily routine, but seeing her first thing in the morning feels like a good omen. "Morning, can I borrow a lighter?" As soon as I put the cigarette in my mouth, she lit it up for me. She's using a DuPont lighter. I gifted it to her on her birthday. It has some scratches. Maybe she's rough in handling it. When I suggested that she change to a new one, she told me she liked it with these scratches. Without uttering a word, we both smoke in the small smoking area. We don't need to seek out conversation each time. Being with her just feels right. What's this? The moment I finished one cigarette and put a second one in my mouth, I took another look at her. Usually, when we meet at the factory, she's in work clothes, but this morning, she was in a black suit with high heels. There's a slit in her long skirt. This is the first time I've seen her like this, and once I start noticing it, my heart won't stop racing. I pushed the cigarette I was holding into the ashtray without smoking it. What a waste. "You're not going to smoke it?" Looking at my suspicious behavior, she raised an eyebrow in puzzlement. Then she smiled with a soft expression I'd never seen before. "You're always so laid back, no need to be nervous." She seemed to have misunderstood my suspicious behavior as being nerves on my first day of work. To be honest, the first day at HQ is no big deal, and I'm not nervous at all. I wanted her to be aware that it's her that's making me nervous and acting strange. "Oh, by the way, your female supervisor is a real piece of work. Be prepared." That's what she said as we left the narrow entrance of the smoking area shoulder to shoulder. And I would soon come to understand the meaning of her words. My department is located on the floor below hers. The building is huge. Seeing her face regularly is unlikely. As I head to my assigned area, I can feel a troubling atmosphere at the staircase in the hallway, and for a moment, I thought about turning right around and going home. But I remember the encouragement I received from Valerie and opened the door to the floor. "Why is it taking you so long to do such a simple task? Your overtime pay isn't your pocket money." As soon as I open the door, a shrill voice hits my eardrums. In a high, sharp voice, this woman is yelling at a male employee in front of her. Apparently, she is the boss Valerie was talking about. Despite her petite size, she's full of force. The supposedly big male employee is getting smaller and smaller. If you can't do it, just say so. If you're incapable, that's just how it is. I don't want to hear "I'll try harder now." Every time the male employee says a word, she keeps yelling like a machine gun. I found myself oddly impressed at how she could spew out such belittling words. Really, with a high school dropout starting from today, no matter how hard I try, I'm just being held back. Is the plan to dump a dropout on me and ruin my career? It seems like I'm the target of her wrath. The male employee getting yelled at must be just a victim of her displaced anger. I feel bad for him. Nice to meet you. I'm starting here from today. My name is Samuel Harris. I'm a high school dropout. Raising my hand, I let out my first greeting in a voice loud enough to echo around the floor. The floor went silent for a moment. The woman who had been shouting was taken aback and seemed at a loss for words. Looking forward to working with you. As I bowed my head toward the female supervisor, she seemed to snap back to reality. The rest of the morning meeting was as tense as walking on eggshells. When the woman introduced me to other employee, she emphasized that I was a high school dropout, worked in a factory, and a mid-career hire. The way she spoke made it seem like those attributes defined my worth. To be honest, it was a gut punch to listen to. I can't see anything but you tarnishing the company's reputation, but do your best. The woman, looking down on me with a condescending tone, was named Jennifer Stevens. Being a department head at 38 is quite an accomplishment. She seemed to be ambitious and mentioned her career every other sentence. I may be a high school dropout, but I'm competent enough, so don't worry. I just smile and let her know that I'm used to being looked down upon for only having a high school education. Jennifer glares at me, who is maintaining a calm exterior. It seems she doesn't quite like my attitude. Don't you think you're taking this job too lightly? It's terrifying to entrust work to someone with such a low level of education. Don't you all agree? It's like being in an elementary school homeroom. However, there are only a few employees who agree with Jennifer, and everyone seems to put a smile on their face forcefully. Jennifer grits her teeth in frustration at the reaction. You're a beautiful woman. I wish you'd show us your smile. I haven't seen you smile today, Jennifer, I said nonchalantly. This remark set her off. Don't ridicule me. That was the closing remark at the morning meeting. Working at the headquarters is a world away from the work I did at the factory, which has left me somewhat bewildered at times. Thankfully, my colleagues are all good people. They are always willing to take the time to answer my questions. It seems my first day's morning meeting went quite well. My supervisor Jennifer, on the other hand, gives me a hard time daily, which doesn't go unnoticed by the others. A majority of them seem to sympathize with me. The reason is rather straightforward. I've always been a meticulous worker, and there's nothing to criticize about my work performance. Most of the gripes Jennifer has with me are about my level of education. My colleagues are slowly growing tired of this baseless harassment. You miss the mountains, don't you? She blew out a puff of purple smoke at the smoking area and asked me that question. I gave a curt reply, yeah, kinda. I've made a habit of running into Valerie here in the mornings and at noon. I've asked her for lunch before, but she declined, said she doesn't like to eat with others. So, I've never had meals or drinks with her. I'll make sure not to look while you're eating. So how about we go for drinks? She let out a small sigh at this and said, I can't, I get aroused watching people eat. That whisper in my ear sent chills down my spine. She ended with a long puff of breath and laughed a bit. She was clearly making fun of me. Oh, by the way, the new part-timer will be assigned to your team in the afternoon. Be nice to him. Her network of information is incredibly detailed and extensive. She explained to me that she moved between different departments for maintenance, and that's why she knew so much. That made her an inside informant, apparently. As Valerie had informed me, when I returned to my floor, I saw the new part-timer. He was still young. In front of him was Jennifer, with a sullen face. Under the pressure of Jennifer's pressure, the part-timer was looking down. "So after the middle school graduate, now a high school graduate, are you trying to ruin our department? How come you had the audacity to apply for our part-time job? Aren't you ashamed of your education?" She was throwing sharp words at someone who had just finished high school. She is said to have graduated from Harvard University. I think that's truly a prestigious education. However, I'm fed up with her attitude of looking down on all her colleagues because of it. Come on, try saying something. I wonder if your vocabulary is limited because you're only a high school graduate. How pathetic. I noticed the part-timer's body shaking a little from the sudden baptism into society. I couldn't keep my cool after noticing that. By the time I realized it, I had stepped between him and Jennifer, glaring at her. Jennifer seemed a bit shaken by the fact that I was glaring at her, who usually just puts a smile on my face. Is educational background really that important? Did this young man, stepping into a workplace for the first time, cause you any inconvenience? Isn't it our job as seniors in society to welcome and educate him warmly? The floor fell silent at my unexpected attitude. Jennifer, who was being glared at, bit her lip. She must be aware that she's being unreasonable. She knows, but she can't help but saying it. Can't believe a middle school graduate has the nerve to stand up to his manager. You're not aware of your place. The nerve. How about you, Jennifer? Why don't you realize that the atmosphere in this department is getting worse because of you? We both glare at each other, neither of us willing to back down. A middle school graduate defending a high school graduate. Well, I guess birds of a feather flock together. It's unsightly. Jennifer said mockingly. She doesn't seem to have any intention of reflecting at all. You know, laughing at people solely based on their education is really the pits. Have a good look at your own face right now. It's so hideous it's laughable. My remark made her explode in anger. The stress and frustration she had been suppressing seemed to erupt all at once. Much to my surprise, she started hurling abuses at me at a pace that was near impossible to comprehend. I'll have you removed from this department. Just you watch. With these words left hanging in the air, she stormed off towards the director's office. She's probably planning to tattle on me to the directors. I could hear Jennifer's voice from the director's office, screaming, "He is unfit to be our employee." The part-timer looked utterly terrified. I patted him on the shoulder and said, "There won't be many more instances like this, so just consider it as building your immunity." At my words, the part-timer gave a small nod, his expression a mix of laughter and tears. Due to Jennifer's report, the whole department became the subject of inquiry for the human resources and the director. Everyone had to face individual meetings with the director and the HR representative. As the one who caused the commotion, I had the meeting for about an hour. I had nothing to hide, so I told them everything honestly. I even admitted that I had disrespected Jennifer to some extent in the dispute. I might not be needed at the headquarters. If I could be sent back to the factory, I wanted to at least make sure I said this at the end, to clearly convey my intentions. The director gave no response to my words. The final decision was astounding. The one branded as unfit for the company was not me, but Jennifer. Jennifer, coming out of the director's office, looked utterly exhausted. Clutching her transfer notice, she staggered back to her desk, looking as if she might collapse at any moment. Silently, she packed her personal belongings into a box and left the department without a word. Jennifer's new post was at the remote factory where I had been. It was clearly a demotion. A few months later, I paid a visit to that factory for the first time in a while. I accompanied Valerie, who was going for maintenance. While it was work for Valerie, I used some of my paid vacation for a day off. I was excited about the plan to camp with Valerie that night, who had recently taken up solo camping. How could I not be thrilled? I greeted the factory manager, presenting him with a small gift. "You've really grown," he said. His eyes seemed a bit moist, and I was taken aback. Maybe he felt like his son had come home. "How much time are you wasting on this? You plan on making your pocket money with overtime, just like a parasite," the usual voice echoed from inside the office. It was Jennifer's angry yell. It seemed she hadn't shown any signs of reflection even after several months. She's busy every day, yelling at the part-time workers and making fun of the staff. She often laments being in this place, saying, "I, who graduated from Harvard University, with that attitude, she stands out in the workplace for all the wrong reasons." Several months have passed and it seems she hasn't made any close friends among the staff. I don't think she's a bad person at heart. The factory manager scratched his head in dismay. Valerie, then fazed by Jennifer's shouting, flung open the office door. The door suddenly opened, and Jennifer turned to look at us astonishedly. She saw me standing behind Valerie, and her face twisted into a demonic expression. I thought to myself, she looks even more haggard than before. Valerie said, "Jennifer, from this moment, you are to use up your paid leave. This is an order from HR." Quickly filling out a vacation request for Jennifer and handing it to the plant manager, she went, "There you go," asking for his approval. "Wait a minute, don't just decide things for me." She reaches out to take back the request, but she can't due to the height difference between her and Valerie. Then, Valerie takes Jennifer's arm. "We're going camping now. You must be excited." She said it with a smile. She then escorts Jennifer, who has a confused expression, out of the office and pushes her into my car. I'm not going for camping. I took Jennifer's outcry as a sign to start and pressed down on the accelerator. "Cheer up, Jennifer," as the sound of the firewood popping in the bonfire echoed. We were sitting around the fire. Jennifer, who was forcibly brought here, is sitting with a stern expression in her work clothes. Valerie is engrossed in turning the seafood agillo I made into a cream pasta. "What do you know? I have my own pride," she stated. It's strange how sitting around a fire at night makes true feelings spill out occasionally. I thought I felt a release of tension from Jennifer's shoulders. "You guys always tell us women, don't you, because you're a woman, or despite being a woman, so I'll say it too. I've been fighting with my only weapon, my educational background. Do you understand how difficult it is to survive in this patriarchal society?" Jennifer's voice, slowly sharing her thought, sounded weaker than I've ever heard before. In the silence between her confessions, the sound of Valerie slurping her pasta could be heard. "Valerie, stop slurping your pasta, chew." In response to my words, Valerie slurped her pasta even louder. Jennifer, watching us, chuckles quietly. "It seems Valerie hasn't thought about that sort of thing at all," she says. "Men who talk like that usually shut up when they are put in their place with real ability," she said, flashing a dangerously mischievous grin. "Jennifer, even without your education, you are still Jennifer. You don't need to belittle others to prove yourself. You can rise on your own, right? Once you're out in the real world, I don't think your education matters that much, but that doesn't mean I disregard your education." I carefully chose my words, trying to convey my thoughts to Jennifer as clearly as possible. I didn't want her to misunderstand my intentions in any way. "Yes, you're right," she admitted. "I might have been trying too hard." She suddenly laughed, and I thought she was beautiful. Did Valerie notice me captivated by Jennifer for a moment? She slurped her pasta with great gusto. The next morning, I was rock climbing after a long time. It didn't take long to get back the feel for free climbing. Valerie and Jennifer are looking up at me from the base of the boulder. "He has been sold already." Suddenly, Valerie's voice echoes in the quiet mountains. Wondering what's going on, I asked Jennifer in secret after climbing down. "Oh, I asked Valerie if she was your girlfriend." She smiled and said, "He's been sold out." Jennifer says with a laugh, "I was fond of you too. What a shame. I'm behaving oddly with the sudden popularity. I'll keep trying my best until I hear the words directly from Valerie." I bowed my head and declared that to Jennifer. She laughed and said, "I guess I've been rejected." I've longed for this day. Here I am, married to an older, overweight woman for money. Yet, now, as we held each other close, I found myself enveloped by the warmth and softness of her skin. Unable to suppress the feelings welling up inside me, I released them onto her. My name is Mike Harrison. I'm a 23-year-old entry-level corporate employee. I graduated from college just a year ago. I've been doing reasonably well at my current job, and I haven't made any major mistakes. But there's one big problem. It's my scholarship repayment. My parents fell and were injured just before I went to college, so I had to go through college without their financial support. As a result, scholarship repayments weighed heavily on me each month. Approximately $300 a month. That's a substantial amount for someone like me who just started working and isn't making much money. My take-home salary is about $1,900. Rent is $500, groceries are $200, plus utilities like water and gas add up to around $100. After adding necessary expenses like my phone bill and clothes, my living expenses roughly amount to $1,000. Plus, considering the insurance I pay for my parents and the $300 for scholarship repayment, it easily amounts to $1,500. And that's after cutting corners by living in a cheap apartment, using a budget smartphone, and cooking my own meals. I could easily spend up to $1,700 if I'm not careful. I tried to save whatever is left over, but unexpected expenses came up occasionally, and my bank balance rarely increased. I couldn't afford the things I like, and falling ill would be disastrous. If it weren't for the $300 scholarship repayments, I could have some fun and peace of mind. I often found myself resenting the situation. But I made this choice, so I have to make the payments. It might be called a scholarship, but it's still a debt. So, I can't quit my job, and I have no choice but to work hard. Heck, that day, I was gnawing on some cheap bread that was about to expire, with a sigh. This made it 7 straight days of the same bread. I was starting to get sick of it, but I couldn't afford anything but cheap, filling food, so I had no choice. "What's up, Mike? Eating bread again today?" Probably because I let out a big sigh, someone slapped me on my back. Looking around, it was our CEO. The company I work for isn't usually the type where the CEO wants to go to the field site. It's a small company, and the boss knows all the employees' faces and names. You could say it's a homey kind of company. Ahaha, things are tight this month. Oh, is that a complaint about your wages being too low? No, that's not it. In my case, I have scholarship repayment. The boss seemed to understand and nodded, clearing up the misunderstanding. I was the only one who joined the company last year and this year, so I had no close peers or juniors. That's why occasionally, the boss or my supervisor would come over to chat like this, and all I could do was give a wry smile. Because in simple terms, I was saying, I'm having a tough time because I'm in the middle of repaying a debt. Well, no one could help me with that. Then the boss started humming thoughtfully, going, is something wrong? Well, I was planning to talk about it anyway. The boss awkwardly brought up a topic to me. Apparently, the boss's business associate, well, a chairman who has been taking care of us since long ago, was looking for a marriage partner for his daughter. The daughter is turning 40 this year. Honestly, even with matchmaking dates, she could seem to find a partner. She really wanted to get married and even said, "If you marry me, I'll give you all my savings." So, because of his reputation, the boss brought the issue up with me. To be honest, she's nearly twice your age, she's 40 this year, and I don't think children are on the table. That's why I wanted to just go through the motions of discussing it. The boss said there was no need for me to take it. Of course, I had no intention of doing it. After all, I had never met this person, and I love kids, so I wanted to have children in the future. So, I just thought of it as a performance for the sake of the CEO's reputation, to show that I'd heard him out. I was supposed to have accepted it as that, at least I thought so. What? Mom collapsed. That night, I received a phone call. My mom, who had been sick, had collapsed and was admitted to the hospital. My dad's income had decreased due to the after effects of an injury, and there's almost no savings left at home. Without money to cover until the insurance come through, I impulsively transferred my meager savings to my parents. As it turned out, my mom's life wasn't in danger, but this incident put not only my scholarship but also my livelihood in jeopardy. What should I do? Looking at my nearly zero balance, I fell into despair. I should have consulted with a local authority if I thought calmly, but I wasn't thinking straight at the time, and before I knew it, I was contacting the boss. 2 days later, on my day off, I was invited to an upscale traditional restaurant. I never thought I would visit such a place in my lifetime. But today was the day to meet the chairman's daughter. So that's why I, a commoner, am here. It's formally a matchmaking date, but I had already decided to marry her. I didn't have money, and I needed money immediately to help my parents. If it's for that, marrying someone I don't even love was a small price to pay. She's a 40-year-old woman. I would just think of it as living with an aunt from my family. That's what I was thinking, but... Nice to meet you, I'm Jane Watson. Pleased to meet you. The woman I decided to marry was absurdly, well, no offense, but she was obese. She must have been wearing nice clothes, but they seemed ready to burst at the seams, and fat was spilling out here and there. Honestly, I was taken aback. I wondered how one would have to eat or live to end up with such a figure. She was a sight beyond belief. But I couldn't turn back now. I'm Mike Harrison. Nice to meet you. Let's drop the formalities. It's too formal. It seems that Jane had a strong personality, and I was incredibly anxious about whether I could handle this in the long run. In the end, everything proceeded smoothly, and we decided to live together. I was used to living alone, but my old run-down apartment was indeed too small for 2 people. Plus, she's the chairman's daughter. As expected, Jane took care of all the living expenses, and I ended up moving into a high-end apartment. The view was great, it's spacious, it was the best. I was a bit apprehensive about living with someone else, but we weren't close, even if we're a couple. It seemed she didn't expect my love either, and she even said, "You can think of me as a family aunt, and we'll have separate bedrooms. Thank you for marrying me." The day after we finished moving, we submitted our marriage form. I've started my own household, but it did feel real at all. Thanks to Jane, I didn't have to worry about money, and I could live in a nice house. I decided to think of it as living in a shared house and take care of my own stuff. I've been quite reliant on Jane financially. I thought I should at least try to live independently. "Good morning, Mike. Breakfast is ready." Surprisingly, Jane was quite a homely person. Her cooking skills were on par with an average Joe like me, and she seemed to really enjoy doing all the household chores. She did mess up sometimes, but it was nothing more than laughable. Her homemaking skills were hardly what you'd expect from a lady of her standing. Why is it so much fun when it's the same thing day after day? It seemed to me that she was doing so many things with a twinkle in her eye. What surprised me the most was her cooking. I had assumed the servings would be XXL sized, but she never made more than enough to fill me up, and she didn't eat that much either. I initially thought she was a big eater, but that didn't seem to be the case. You know, my dad is overprotective of me. I think it's because my mom passed away early, but he has a maid do everything for me, so I can't do the things I want to, and he always serves me so much food. Since the maid went through the trouble of making it, I always try to eat it all. One day, while we were having a beer on our day off, Jane told me this. It seemed that she had been brought up with an excessive amount of care and it was a burden to her. I thought the only way to escape from my father's hold was to get married. But look at me, right? Couldn't find a partner, so I had no choice but to use money. I'm sorry to have saddled you with a woman like me. When the dust settles, you can divorce me if you want. Please, just let me stay by your side for a while. Jane, looking quite apologetic, said this to me. Regardless of the situation, Jane was always calm, able to see things objectively, and I felt that as a human being, she was a woman with a strong core. Perhaps her weight gain was also due to parental oppression. Jane has been prepared to be discarded by me someday. That's why she's living this free lifestyle now, her eyes sparkling. The first feeling I had for her was sympathy. I was able to live freely because my parents were laissez-faire, but she didn't have that luxury. It being with me allows her to be free, even if just for a bit. I wanted to support her. Although, in the current situation, I was the one being supported. But it would be a lie to say that I had no affection for her. Jane was what you might call an inclusive woman. She'd console me when I made a mistake at work or was feeling down. I felt a maternal presence from her, I guess. I felt incredibly at ease. I wanted to be by her side, and before I knew it, I was in love with her. Seeing Jane trying new things, sometimes failing, sometimes succeeding and being overjoyed, Jane, despite her appearance, was very beautiful. So much so that I didn't care about her physical appearance. And then, 5 years passed. Jane and I hadn't divorced. Instead, we had become a very live-de-vie couple. When we walked around town, passers-by could help but look our way. We stood out a lot. But such scenes have become a part of our daily life. Look at her, she's like a model. She's gorgeous. A group of high school girls giggled and chattered as they passed by us. Hearing their voices, Jane shrugged and said, "I'm a bit too old to be a model, don't you think?" Yes, the person the high school girls had complimented as a model was Jane. Now, Jane exuded a mature aura and beauty, elegantly wearing a tight skirt and high heels. Why did this happen? In short, living with me liberated her from stress, reduced her food intake, household chores made her move around more, and she naturally lost weight. Not only that, she even started going to the gym saying, "I was worried about doing intense exercise before," and before we knew it, she acquired a truly beautiful figure. You wouldn't believe she was 45. In fact, I now look bare in comparison. Scenes like this reminded me once again of the horror of stress, really. But, sometime later, Jane became bedridden. She stopped going to the gym, and even struggled with meals. I was flustered, thinking she was sick, when I heard Jane's voice from the bedroom. We basically sleep in the same bedroom now, but when we want to be alone or unwell, we use the beds in our separate rooms. Lately, Jane had been spending all her time in her own room. "Mike, I have something important to discuss with you." "Oh, okay." Jane's frail voice. She mentioned going to the hospital today. Could it be a serious illness? With shaking hands, I braced myself and entered her bedroom. I would try not to be surprised, no matter what she told me. I was sure she was the one suffering. Entering the bedroom, I found Jane lying down, looking in pain. Seeing her slowly sitting up, I couldn't help but ask in a voice close to tears, "Are you okay?" Shoot, I didn't want to make her worry. Biting my lip, I regretted my words. Seeing my reaction, Jane said, "I'm sorry to worry you. I went for a checkup today, had them look inside me." Then she handed me a picture, printed in black and white with a small circle marked on it. Inside the circled area, there was a small dot. Wait, is this? Yes, it's an echograph. I knew what Jane was trying to say. So, this meant I'm pregnant. What, really? I let out a stunned exclamation. Of course, Jane and I had shared nights together, so there was a possibility. But I was sure the chance of a natural pregnancy at 45 was about 1%. The doctor said it was a miracle. Jane revealed with tears of joy welling up in her eyes. It turned out that all the recent discomfort she had been experiencing was morning sickness, and there was nothing else wrong with her health. I had given up on having a child, but knowing that a baby, our baby, is growing inside me, I'm so happy. I've been longing for this day, she admitted before breaking down in tears. I gently, very gently, held her in my arms. I could feel her warmth and hear her heartbeat, and I found myself tearing up too. Thank you, Jane. Truly, thank you. I am so happy right now. Me too. Both of us, grown adults, wailed pitifully. Sure, there are risks associated with late-life pregnancy, and undoubtedly we're about to face all sorts of challenges. But none of that matters now. All we want is to share the joy of welcoming this new life. Our thoughts turn to the even happier future that's sure to come. Suddenly, she came close to me as she grasped my hand and looked up with her serious face. I was held captive by her tearful eyes. And then, with resolve, I opened my mouth to speak. When she heard my words, she rubbed up against me. Her face was so adorable, I knew I would never forget her at this moment. There was a girl at my school, feared by everyone and the most beautiful bad girl. Her name was Ella Smith. Flowing long hair, a small face, big round eyes with long lashes. A classic beauty. Nearly everyone who met her would say she's beautiful. But she came with rumors. She never lost a fight. If you crossed her, you would see hell. If I tried to list them all, it would never end. The scary rumors were abundant. That's why no one dared to approach her. She was always alone. But the truth was, she was my childhood friend. We were in the same class in kindergarten. We played together until about the 2nd grade. We lived close by, and every day we walked to and from school together. Little Ella used to say, "My mom's always away because of her work." Whenever she said that, she looked truly sad, so I stayed by her side, hoping to make her smile. Since we started elementary school, I often helped Ella with her studies. She struggled with studying, but she never hated it. Whenever she solved a problem, her joy made me happy too. Spending time with Ella, whether playing or studying, was so much fun. I couldn't help it. But in the 3rd grade, my parents were relocated, and I had to change schools. As Ella cried, "I'll be lonely," I hugged her tight. "Don't worry, we'll always be friends. If you ever need help, I'll come running," I told her. Looking back now, I think what an irresponsible thing I said. But as a 3rd grader, I truly meant it. Even after I moved, I remember worrying if Ella was crying. That Ella, whom I adored, I met again at the high school entrance ceremony. Growing up from the cute girl she was, Ella had become a beautiful young woman. Her gaze was a bit sharper than before, but I recognized her instantly. But she looked like a complete bad girl. Compared to when she was young, I was a bit shocked at the change. But I was happy to see her again. so I mustered up the courage and spoke to her. "Ella White, I'm Oliver Brown. Remember me? It's been a while. How have you been?" When Ella looked at me, she frowned noticeably, and then she yelled, "I don't know you." Her momentum left me frozen in place for a while, but leaving me behind, Ella quickly walked away. That was the last time I spoke to Ella. Ella started skipping school towards the end of the first year of high school. I wondered what happened, but of course, I couldn't ask her. By the time I was a senior, Ella had been held back a year. I figured she hadn't attended enough days, but there were also rumors that she was held back because of too many fights. Everyone was scared, but even though Ella was a bad girl, I was worried about her. I couldn't forget how Ella cried when I moved away in 3rd grade because she was lonely. To me, even if she became a bad girl, she was still the crybaby Ella. Besides, I was curious about how Ella became a bad girl. But time passed without me being able to talk to Ella, and my graduation was approaching. Just as we were nearing graduation, unexpectedly, Ella began to talk to me. At the time of school dismissal, Ella, who had been waiting for me near the lockers, asked, "Can I ask you something?" She then grabbed my hand, bewildered as I was, and pulled me into an empty classroom. As I stood there surprised, Ella suddenly fell to her knees in front of me. Why are you kneeling down?" While I was in turmoil, Ella, with her head bowed, loudly asked, "Please teach me how to study." I didn't understand the situation, so I decided to ask her the reason. Then she began to say something unexpected. I want to become a nurse." It seems that Ella lives with her mother. She got divorced when Ella was a baby. Ella's father, apparently, was a violent man. Ella's mother worked desperately hard and raised Ella. Maybe that's why Ella used to say Mom is never at home when she was little, because she was busy working. Despite calling ourselves childhood friends, I had no clue about these circumstances. Ella's mother got into an accident and suffered a severe injury. This was when Ella was a freshman in high school. Although her mother is now discharged from the hospital, Ella had to miss school frequently due to taking care of her mother, accompanying her for rehabilitation, and working part-time to secure their living expenses, which led to her having to repeat a grade. So, it wasn't fights or any other similar problems after all. When I heard Ella's story, I felt indescribable emotions. While I was casually attending school, Ella and her mother were struggling hard. It must have been tough. Ella simply nodded in response to my words. "Well, she's discharged from the hospital now. Back then, we had insurance, so we got some money from that, and also from the person who caused the accident. We somehow managed, but life was already hard, and with the added living expenses, I had to work part-time. As a result, I could hardly attend school and ended up repeating a grade." "How is your mom doing now?" Upon my question, Ella's face brightened. "Yeah, she's doing great now. She worked hard at her rehabilitation. Her injury was severe, so she can't push herself too much, but she found a job at a call center where she can work sitting down. So, I quit my daytime job and have been able to go to school." Ella started to think about her future now that she was able to go to school. She wanted to become a nurse, the profession that supported her and her severely injured mother. "Do you think it's impossible for someone like me to aim to be a nurse?" When Ellie asked in a small voice, I hurriedly denied it. "There's no way that's true. You've been through a lot, Ella. That's why you'll make a great nurse." At my words, Ella showed a smile, but she had repeated a grade, and even before that, she didn't focus much on her studies. Even her high school teachers told her that the path to nursing might be tough. The teachers told me that a rebel like me couldn't become a nurse, that it's too late for me to catch up on my studies, but I just can't give up. Ella clenched her fists tightly. Being dismissed by her high school teachers for being a rebel and told her dream was impossible must have hurt. That's when I remembered you. I mean, Oliver. Me. When I asked back, not understanding the meaning, Ella nodded. "You said you would fly to my rescue if I was ever in trouble." I was taken aback at that moment. That was something I had told Ella when we were in the 3rd grade, when I was moving away. "So, you did remember me after all. Why did you act like you didn't know me at the entrance ceremony?" At my words, Ella turned away in a huff, and then she said, a bit petulantly, "Because if people knew you were friends with someone like me, they might look at you weirdly too. What if you get bullied again?" When Ella said that, I remembered our kindergarten days. Back when we were in kindergarten, I was chubby, and my friends called me fatty and bullied me. The one who stood up for me back then was Ella. Even though she had become a high schooler, Ella was worried that I might get bullied, and she tried to distance herself from me. I felt relieved. Ella started to use riffer language and became a lone wolf. But she's still the same kind-hearted girl she was when we were younger. She's always been considerate of others. I sincerely thought I wanted to be on Ella's side. "All right, I'll help you with your studies," I said. Ella's eyes sparkled. "Really? Are you sure?" "Of course. I'll rush over if you're having trouble." I promised, didn't I? You're in trouble right now, so I'll be there to help. Seeing Ella's happy face made me happy too. From that day on, I started helping Ella so she could pass her nursing school entrance exam. By the way, I asked Ella why she had become a so-called delinquent, but she didn't really know either. She said, "I've always tried to help anyone being bullied. As I kept doing that, people started to fear going against me, said I was good in fights, and so on. That might have led to the delinquent label." Apparently, she had never actually been in a fight. When I asked if she wanted to clear up the misunderstanding, Ella said, "I'm not interested. I don't care what people who don't really know me say. As long as my important people understand me, that's enough." She added, "As someone who always worries about what others think, I found Ella's steadfastness quite cool. I know that you're kind-hearted, Ella, and that you're working hard towards your dreams," I told her. Then Ella laughed and said, "Ahaha, that's a bit embarrassing, but I'm happy. Thank you." Seeing Ella's beautiful smile, my heart wouldn't stop pounding. And at that moment, I realized that my feelings for Ella were romantic. Most of the time, Ella and I studied in my room. Ella seemed reluctant to go to places like coffee shops because it cost money, and since I was living alone after graduating from college, my place was just right. Ella's progress in her studies was indeed a bit slower than her peers, but she didn't hate studying, so she absorbed everything like a sponge when I taught her. I could tell that she was studying hard even on days when she didn't meet me and carefully revising the parts she got wrong. Watching Ella focus on her studies reminded me of the old days when I used to teach her. She was still in elementary school then, but even at that time, Ella seemed to enjoy learning from me. I enjoyed teaching Ella, and I started to feel comfortable spending time with her. One day, Ella texted me, "I'll be late due to committee work." We were supposed to study at my house that evening. It was the start of winter, and it was getting dark early, so I decided to pick Ella from school. As an alumnus, I was allowed to enter the school building with a visitor's pass. When I peeped into her class that I heard about every day, I found Ella there, but she wasn't doing any committee work. She was alone in the empty classroom, wiping down desks. She was diligently erasing graffiti from a desk. When I took a closer look at the desk, I saw it had words like "po-delinquent," "dumb," and "old woman" written on it. I instantly thought, this is bullying, and I felt a surge of anger. I then confronted her. Ella was surprised at my sudden appearance. Why are you here?" "That doesn't matter now. That's bullying, right?" Ella glanced down at the desk and said nonchalantly, "I don't know, maybe. Are you being bullied by someone? Do you know who it is? I'll catch them for you." At my fury, Ella smiled. "What's so funny?" "Well, you used to be the one I saved from bullies. You've become strong," she said. I was embarrassed when she spoke to me like a mother, but it was true, so there was nothing I could do about it. Times have changed. You can at least stand up to bullies now. You probably just want to mock me because I, a former delinquent, have started to study all of a sudden. With college entrance exams approaching, you must be stressed out, aren't you?" With a detached air, Ella said that, "There's no way we can let things continue like this. I've already talked to the teacher. If it's affecting your studies, we'll take measures, but for now, let's leave it to the teacher. Wasting time on a witch hunt is pointless. Instead, I'll focus on my studies. I'm behind everyone else." so every second is precious to me. After hearing these words, I calmed down. It was wrong for me to be this fired up when the actual victim, Ella, was so calm. Ella didn't care about the bullying. She was totally focused on her dream. I admired her for being so cool. And I realized at that moment, yes, I really liked her. The only thing I could do for the girl, it was helping her study for the exams. Ella and I crammed together for the upcoming entrance exams. She got accepted into her school of choice. On the day we found out about her acceptance, she came to my house. I already knew about her acceptance from a phone call beforehand, so I had prepared a meal and a cake to celebrate. When I opened the front door, she came right up to me and said, "Tell me that you love me." I didn't know how to react when the girl I liked suddenly approached me and said that. As I hesitated, she grabbed my arm, looked up at me seriously. I could tell that despite her strong gaze, she was somewhere nervous. Looking into her eyes, I made up my mind. I gently untangled her hand from my arm, held both of her hands tightly, and said, "I love you, Ella. I love your kindness, your dedication to your dreams, and your hard work. I want to be with you, not as a friend or childhood friend, but as a boyfriend." Without saying a word, Ella hugged me and rubbed her head against me. Whether she was moved or hiding her embarrassment, I wasn't sure, but it was a very adorable gesture. From that day, Ella and I became a couple. Later on, I found out that Ella knew I liked her. She said she could tell because sometimes there was a certain warmth in my eyes when I looked at her. It was so obvious by the way you looked at me that you liked me. It was crystal clear. I felt embarrassed when she told me that, but it was true, so there was nothing I could do to deny it. Ella had the same feelings, but she had decided to focus on the exams until they were over. It was just like her, and when I heard that, I fell in love with her all over again. Now we are parents of 2 kids. Ella, with no traces of her delinquent past, is a kind and caring nurse and a mother. We live with Ella's mother, so we're a family of 5. Every day is lively and happy. How was that? Subscribing to our channel will be a great motivation for us. See you in the next video. My name is Jake Miller, and I'm 32 years old. I'm currently working as a temp worker. The hours are consistent, and the job stress is minimal as a temp worker, even if the pay isn't great. On top of that, I'm supporting my single mom out of my mere earnings, so my living situation isn't exactly grand. But I've never really had any big hobbies, and I don't have much material desire, so I can live without pushing myself too hard. For me, it's more important to work without stress than to live a life of luxury. The reason for that goes back 4 years. 4 years ago, I was working as a full-time employee at a different company. I was at the prime working age, and because of my age, I was given significant tasks to handle, so I worked tirelessly, sacrificing my personal life. Working overtime was my routine, and I even worked on my days off. Sometimes, I cut back on sleep and meal times to work. At first, I was happy to see my work performance improving, but gradually, I accumulated physical fatigue. However, I was afraid that if I reduced my workload, my performance would drop, so I couldn't hold back on work. The place I used to work was what you'd call a sweatshop, where yelling was an everyday occurrence and mistakes were often deducted from my paycheck. Sarcastic comments and verbal abuse from my boss, a man named Tony, towards his less capable subordinates were a daily occurrence. One day, I found myself frozen in front of the office. While thinking that I had to go in, I just couldn't bring myself to enter the building. Eventually, I went to a hospital and was diagnosed with overwork depression. I was scared, but I thought it was dangerous to continue as it was, so I somehow managed to quit. The angry calls from my boss were relentless, and there were times when he even came to my house, pounding on the door and shouting, "Come out," like a debt collector. But after spending my days holed up in my room without showing my face, he finally gave up. 4 years have passed and my overwork depression has completely healed. Now, I wonder why I didn't sue the company, or why I didn't seek help from the proper authorities, but I think my judgment was clouded at the time. I'm surprised that such companies still exist in modern America. where work style diversification is progressing. I'm really glad I quit. After that, I switched to being a temp worker. I didn't tell my mother about my overwork depression, but perhaps she sensed something from my sudden resignation and switched to temp work. She simply said, "Do what you want." This is the fourth company I've worked for since becoming a temp worker. I go about my days unobtrusively, calmly performing the tasks assigned to me. This company recently experienced a change in leadership, as the previous CEO suddenly passed away 6 months ago, and his daughter, a woman named Susan Redstone, took over as CEO. 40-year-old Susan is a hard-working career woman with strong, beautiful eyes. She seems busy, and temp workers like me hardly ever see her. Today, like every day, I was taking care of the plants during a break at my work. The previous CEO was fond of plants, and so many potted plants were left behind in the office. They were taken care of by the previous CEO, but when no one else stepped up to the task, I took it on. In fact, I also grow plants in my private life. When I was suffering from overwork depression, I wanted to feel something with a strong life force around me. I couldn't afford a pet, so I chose low-maintenance houseplants. It was meant to be a comfort, but the effect was phenomenal. I felt healed looking at the greenery, and just looking at the vibrant leaves full of life seemed to make my day better. Since then, I've become a plant lover. I not only have houseplants at home, but also vegetables and flowers planted in planters. So caring for the office plants, which were left without a caretaker, was just part of my hobby. But my temp period is almost over. I was worried about the plants. Shortly before my temp period ended, I had the opportunity to greet the CEO. It was the first time I had greeted her since she took over from her father, whom I had greeted when I started working at this temp job. I was only here for a short time, but thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you too. You've worked hard. Our new CEO, Mrs. Susan Redstone, speaks with such understatement, showing no interest in a temp like me. The same goes for the potted plants. The large potted plants in the CEO's office seemed to be watered, but they appeared lifeless. Susan. I nervously wondered if it was my place to speak up to the CEO, but nonetheless, I began to speak. Can you find someone who can take care of the plants? The previous CEO cared for these plants with love. Plants? Oh, that's right. My father left lots of planters around the company, didn't he? Finally, it seemed like the CEO remembered. She must have been too busy to even notice the plants. You've been taking care of them. I have a few plants at home. Being able to spend my spare time at work with the plants was a healing experience. At my words, the CEO fell silent, lost in thought, and after a while, she simply said, "I see." That was the end of the day. But on my last day as a temp, the CEO called me in again. Alone in the CEO's office, she started to ask me various things. What are your plans for the future? Where's your next temp assignment? Well, I haven't figured that out yet. I'm having trouble even finding a place to live. It's quite a predicament. Ha. In my mumbled response, the CEO reacted sharply, leaning forward. You haven't decided yet, that's good. But you mentioned having trouble finding a place to live. Is there an issue with your current place? Well, I've been asked to move out, but I'm having trouble finding a good apartment. I currently live in an old shabby apartment. The only good thing about it is the low rent. As a temp, you never know when work will stop, so I can't afford to spend money on rent. That's why my old apartment, with its cheap rent and basic amenities like a bath and toilet, was perfect. But the landlord, who was also the owner, retired. His son took over and quickly decided to demolish the building. If they claim it's due to aging, residents can't object. So now, I'm on the verge of losing my job and home all at once. When I told the CEO this, she hurried towards me, the heels of her shoes clicking on the floor. Then, she leaned in close. The CEO has such flawless skin that it's hard to believe she's 40. While I was being mesmerized by her, she suddenly made an unexpected proposal. I'll give you money if you live with me. I was so surprised by the beautiful CEO's sudden request that I fell back onto the floor. I mean, it was that shocking. 3 days later, I was standing in the living room of the CEO's family home. Just a moment ago, the CEO had shown me around the house and I had just caught my breath. I guess that's the end of the tour. I gave you the keys, right? My room is empty. I've moved everything to my current place, so there aren't any rooms you need to avoid. Feel free to use them as you wish. If you find anything uncomfortable or broken, let me know anytime. With that, the CEO left for work. She seems to be busy today as well. I sat down on the sofa, reflecting on the whirlwind of the past 3 days. Then will you live with me? She asked me on my last day of temping was not with her, but with the multitude of plants that the previous CEO had left in his family home after his death. Apparently, the CEO's mother passed away when she was young, and her only family was her father, the previous CEO. Now that the previous CEO has passed away, the CEO's family home, where I am now, is vacant. The CEO is currently living alone near her family home and plans to move back to the family home after her father's death. But even after half a year, she's still so busy that she can't spare the time to move. But a vacant house deteriorates quickly. Not to mention, the CEO's family home is full of plants left by the previous CEO who loved plants. There are plants not only in planters, but also in the garden. Right now, the garden is a little overgrown. But the CEO seems to be a bit neurotic, and she doesn't like the idea of workers coming into her house or garden when she's not there. So I ended up being the one chosen for the task. The CEO found out I had been taking care of the office plants and asked my bosses and colleagues about me. She seemed to have investigated what kind of person I was. Then she decided to entrust me with the management of her family home and taking care of the plants there. The arrangement was until the CEO could move back home once her work had settled down. Of course, I was hesitant at first. No. I haven't really talked to the CEO much, have I? Just because you ask my bosses and colleagues. What will you do if I run away with the things in the house? The CEO laughed off my words. There's no reason to leave anything valuable in an empty house. I've already moved everything to my apartment. The only things left in the house are plants and items of little value. And even though we only talked a little, I get the feeling that you're a good person. I'd like you to take this as a middle-aged woman's ramblings, not a business person's. I've always been good at judging people, and I've got a decent grasp of your personal information since we hired you through an agency. If you do anything strange, I'll report you immediately, so don't worry. All I could do was give a bitter smile. But, as long as I was living in the CEO's family home and taking care of the cleaning and the plants, I would get paid. It wasn't a bad deal for me, as I could look for a new apartment during that time. And so, I ended up living in the CEO's family home. 2 weeks after I started living in the CEO's house, the CEO, I now call her Susan, sometimes came to check on the place. She always seemed exhausted from her work. For such a tired Susan, I prepared a homemade meal. After my recovery from overwork depression, I started to pay attention to my diet and got into cooking. Though my menu was very simple: meat and potatoes, soup, spinach salad, and stir-fried root vegetables. But Susan seemed to be really pleased. She didn't have time and often relied on bread and nutrition drinks and jellies for meals. Having a homemade meal and sharing a leisurely meal with someone else after such a long time, it's relaxing. Thank you so much. Susan was more delighted than I had imagined. No, I'm thankful to be allowed to live here. I thought I could at least return the favor. From that day on, Susan started coming over occasionally to check up and have meals. I also enjoyed the time I spent around the dining table with Susan. Susan at home was completely different from her image at work. At home, the career woman in her toned down, lounging on the sofa, eating a lot despite her thin body, and hanging around, saying it was too troublesome to return to her apartment. No one in the company knows about this side of her. I was happy to think that I was the only one who knew about it. On the contrary, I felt lonely in the quiet house on the days Susan didn't come. About 2 months after I started living in Susan's house, Susan brought some alcohol as a thank you for the meals, and I prepared some snacks, and we drank together. Susan, who was quite drunk, weakly shared her past. "I'm divorced, you know. My ex-husband cheated on me, but it was my fault. I was too absorbed in my work, and I neglected my relationship with him. When I found out about his affair, I blamed him. Then he said, 'You never tried to make time for me, did you? Your work is important to you, isn't it? I want to be with someone who cares about me.'" Susan seemed to have realized then. She had been leaving her ex-husband lonely. "Well, my ex-husband is remarried and happy. I've learned my lesson, and we've reconciled because he understands that I'm a workaholic. But the real problem is my father." At that point, Susan lifted her face, which had been down. Beyond Susan's gaze was a photo of her with her late father, the former CEO. Did something happen with the former CEO? I had a bad relationship with my father. We both were absorbed in our work, and we often clashed. I couldn't easily apologize to my father. We had a fight over work a few days before he died, and we ended up parting on bad terms. I'm sure my father would have preferred a daughter who was more honest and had a good parent-child relationship. Susan seemed to deeply regret having ended up in a fight with the former CEO. I wish I could have said something nice, but I couldn't find the words to comfort Susan. I wish I had more meals and drinks with my father. Susan seemed to be drunk and fell asleep. I thought that Susan, our new CEO, was a workaholic, but it turned out she was just a normal woman struggling with a relationship with her father. Ever since I started living at Susan's place, I feel like I've come to know many unexpected sides of her. One night, when she had fallen asleep drunk, I gently covered her with a blanket. A few days after that, Susan asked me to clean the room of the former CEO. She seemed to have roughly organized the visible areas before, but apparently she hadn't gotten to the closet yet. Until then, the cleaning tasks I had been entrusted with were things like vacuuming, dusting, and window cleaning. This was the first time she asked me to organize the inside of the closet. While I was nervous, I felt happy thinking that she trusted me. And then I found it. Something. Looking at it, I thought that this was beyond my capabilities to organize, so I had Susan come over on her day off. What can't be organized by anyone but me. I thought I had all the bank books and such with me. There's no bank book. Look at this. I opened a box that I found in the closet in the former CEO's room in front of Susan. What came out was her childhood essays, certificates, albums, and so on. "Susan, I know you've been concerned about your troubled relationship with your father, thinking he must have wanted a more obedient daughter, but surely that's not the case. Look, he's even written memories and messages by hand in this album. To the former CEO, you were his beloved and prideful daughter. If not, he wouldn't have kept these essays and certificates so preciously. Few people keep such childhood memories." Even I became a bit emotional. I had no idea he kept these. Susan picked up each item the former CEO had stored, holding them gently. "He was a loving man, wasn't he? Maybe the former CEO was just like you, struggling to express his feelings in words, but he was always thinking about you." As I said that, I continued to stroke Susan's back as she cried. A month later, the date was finally set for Susan to return to her family home. When I was thinking about moving out, Susan looked at me with a serious expression. "Will you marry me? I'll give you everything I have." Surprised, I swallowed and stared back into Susan's eyes. Even a slowpoke like me had noticed Susan's affection for me since I started living here. It was evident in her gaze and expressions. And it was the same for me. "I feel the same way. Will you live with me from now on?" At my words, Susan showed me the biggest smile I've ever seen. "I can't cook or clean at all. Is that okay? I am pretty good at the things you're not. You know that, right? We could make a great couple." We both chuckled together. And then, we successfully started dating, and we are living together in Susan's family home. Susan is still busy as ever, but she makes adjustments to her work so we can eat together as much as possible, while being soothed by the plants. It was Susan who suggested that we should try to eat together. "I don't want to have regrets. I want to take care of you in my own way." I was glad to feel Susan's affection. I've been taking a lot of pictures of Susan, and I've been adding them to the album that my father-in-law carefully kept in the box. It's to allow her Father in heaven to see his beloved daughter. I want to continue to be a couple who talk a lot, spend time together, and cherish each other.